Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, and welcome to New York Fashion Week. I normally am a fan of Michigan State, but I don't know if you saw the game on Saturday with Michigan and Notre Dame, but it was quite something. But enough about football. Well, I'm just amazed at the turnout here. I thank you for coming out on this night to be here. Thank you very much. They even gave me a sippy cup. So, I know you're all still recovering from the CNN Tea Party Republican debate last night. How is it that the CNN can actually join hands with the Tea Party and together, Wolf Blitzer said, our partners, the Tea Party Express. And I'm like, what kind of alternate universe is this? I don't think it is. Actually, it's the way it is now, isn't it? Can you imagine a debate that's called the CNN Teachers Union debate? Because I will contend there are more members of the Teachers Union than there are of the Tea Party. So, I just don't think we're going to see that debate very soon. But anyways, I have a number of things going through my head that I'd like to say, and we're going to have a time during the Q&A to talk about politics and what's going on, and there'll be microphones. This is being taped for C-SPAN tonight, one of our great national resources in this country, the only truly objective documentary. There's no editing, but usually when I speak, they have to run. In fact, I don't think I've had a C-SPAN appearance where they haven't had to run a disclaimer saying that things are going to be said, language is going to be used, and please remove the children from the room. So I am going to attempt tonight how's that? Is that better? I'm going to attempt tonight to not have to see that disclaimer by C-SPAN at the head of this show. So let's see how I do. And we'll put a quarter in the sippy cup for every time I violate the thing. I've written this book. It's a book of short stories. They're all nonfiction short stories. I love the short story form, and I love reading short stories, and I've always wanted to write them. And I thought, I don't know if I've ever seen a book of nonfiction short stories. So I decided to write one. And there's 24 stories in here, and they're all based on events that took place in my lifetime between this age on the cover, which is me at, I have to say, that's me at 13 months, although I look like I'm 3. My poor mother. And the picture on the back, which is me on West 55th Street here in Manhattan, the day I turned in Roger and me to the lab to make the first print that we were going to take to the film festival. And and that's a Duart, if you remember. So all these stories pretty much take place between then, except the first story in the book is called The Epilogue. And the reason it's called The Epilogue is it's the last story in the next volume that will come out 2 or 3 years from now. And I decided to start with the last story of that book as the first story in this book. I'm not on drugs. The reason for that is I kind of wanted to start in the present of where I've been, and then take a look back through how I got to this point. And I'm not going to read this entire, I'm not only going to read the little opening of the first chapter or the first story in the book, which is called The Execution of Michael Moore. But you can read it online. The Guardian has printed an excerpt from this chapter, and it goes through what happened to me after I gave that Oscar speech, and where it was the 5th day of the war, and I went out on the stage, and I said thank you. I hope I said thank you. But I want to know where it went from there, but I forgot to thank my agent and my wardrobe designer and my hairstylist and the other people I was supposed to thank. And I invited up my fellow nominees to the stage, the other 4 documentary filmmakers. And together I said, we make nonfiction films, but we live in fictitious times. We live in a time with a president who was elected with fictitious election results. And now we are in the 5th day of a war that has been inaugurated due to a very large piece of fiction. That fiction, of course, being that there would be weapons of mass destruction there. So I was properly booed off the stage for saying all of this. And in this chapter, I describe what happened to me backstage that night when we went home to Michigan and the ensuing death threats. And actually, I could have handled it if it was just the death threats, but it went from there into actual attempted assaults on me, physical assaults, and then finally a young man who had decided to blow up our house. And only because he had his whole cache of weapons and ammunition, bomb-making materials, and one night he was kind of getting it all together, and his AK-47 went off in his apartment, as AK-47s are wont to do. And a neighbor called the police, and they came and they arrested him, and they read his hit list, and I was at the top of his hit list. The others were Rosie O'Donnell, Janet Reno. Essentially, it was a group of lesbians and me. I don't know how I made that list, but I felt somewhat honored. But I just want to read you just a snippet of how this chapter begins, and I'm going to move to a few other things in the book. So I just like to read just a few excerpts of some of the stories in this book, and then we'll open it up to the floor. But this is how the book begins, as it should, with the Glenn Beck radio show from May 17th, 2005. Exact quote. I'm thinking about killing Michael Moore. And I'm wondering if I could kill him myself, or if I'd need to hire someone to do it. No, I think I could. I think he could be looking me in the eye, and I could just be choking the life out of him. Is this wrong? I stopped wearing my What Would Jesus Do band, and I've lost all sense of right and wrong now. I used to be able to say, yeah, I'd kill Michael Moore, and then I'd see the little band, What Would Jesus Do? And then I'd realize, oh, you wouldn't kill Michael Moore, or at least you wouldn't choke him to death. And well, now I'm not so sure. As this sort of vile stuff goes out over the radio and on a certain cable news channel, unfortunately, it enters the minds of those who are not entirely together and encourages them to do various things. So that's how the book begins. And now I want to take you back to 1965, and I was just coming out of 5th grade. This is from a story in the book called Pietà, and the larger chapter is about a trip that we took to New York here. My mother loaded us in the car, my sisters and I, because Michelangelo's Pietà was at the New York World's Fair in 1964-65. And being good Catholics, we had to go see it, even if it meant driving 800 miles from Michigan. But on the way, she decided to take us to Washington, D.C. And this is what transpired. When I finished 5th grade in the summer of 1965, my mother loaded my sister